the VIFF theater, which is like super close to me, just did a whole reno, and the seats are nice, the auditorium's nice, like the venue's nice. What I can't stand, and this is kind of like a real first world problem, also like just a pet peeve of mine, is when the popcorn line isn't going smoothly. They don't make the new popcorn as the line is moving.
Oh,
so
yeah.
like it's kind of like start stop all the time. So they make one batch of popcorn and then it gets sold out really fast and they have to make another patch. So you're standing there on the side waiting like for 3, 4, or 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And granted, it's not a lot of time. It's just, I wish it was faster. The popcorn could be better for sure. It's funny, like popcorn, a lot of people like the really big kernels, which is what they serve at the VIFF Center. I don't necessarily like the big kernels because it doesn't crunch as well, I find.
Yeah, like, well, I don't like to have like a really hard center in each thing. So,
well, no, that's just like that means the kernel's like not popped all the way through, I think. But like the size you can get at Cineplex theaters, I think is nice. The one thing about Cineplex theater is that the popcorn ranges in quality.
Oh yeah, totally depending on like when you get to the counter, like if you got
and
there.
Also, yeah, the amount of salt content or flavicol, I guess, which is I think what they use.
Oh, it's definitely, yeah, I use it too. It's flavicol for sure.
Yeah, it ranges, right? Sometimes it's nice and salty, and sometimes I feel like I'm not eating any flavor. I'm not getting any flavor out of this.
Oh yeah, because it's down to the individual pour. Like you're taught as an employee, like you got to use the scoop that comes in the bin. But like, some people have a heavy hand, some people don't get a full scoop, and then the batch takes on a life of its own.
Yeah, and I like to get extra butter on my popcorn, and sometimes it feels like you don't get any extra butter at all. Like my hands don't get greasy enough.
You should be like licking the fingers as
I know, right? It should be like finger licking good type deal, but it's not.
But so you went to that theater to see The Fall, and was the restoration as good as you hoped?
It looked fine. It looked great. The movie wasn't as good as I remembered.
Oh, all right.
It was a lot more disjointed than I remember because the first time I saw it was when it first came out in theaters, and back then Tarsem Singh was only known as Tarsem.
Yes, I thought he still kind of went by Tarsem these days.
Oh, does he?
I've heard it both ways.
I thought for the Immortals he was known as Tarsem Singh.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he reverted to it.
Maybe, but I guess in my mind I had remembered a less disjointed film, I should say. Because when I watched it this time, it wasn't nearly as good. There were some parts where I felt could have been tweaked to be better. And it wasn't as visually stunning as I remember. Maybe because I was like sitting like second row because I got there late because the popcorn line was really slow.
Yeah, well, we do have a lot of stuff to talk about in this episode. I mean, it's been a little while, and so you saw The Fall as part of like a VIFF screening. So we'll definitely be.
Well, it was at the VIFF theater. It wasn't part of VIFF, but it was like at the.
Oh,
VIFF
they were
venue.
hosting it, yeah. But you actually went to the festival that they put on in like the end of September, beginning of October. I was at TIFF in middle of September, so we'll probably talk about that this episode. And a few other things. There's been movies, there's been shows.
Okay, all right, well, let's get started then.
Welcome to the Extra Buttery podcast. It's a show about movies, TV, anything with a story and actors on a screen, really. Join Jason Chen and Robert Snow's free-flowing conversation with deep dives into characters and plot with the occasional salty opinion. So get your popcorn, I got mine right here. Let's start the show!
Welcome to the 128th episode of the Extra Buttery podcast. My name is Jason Chen in Vancouver. Joining me is Robert Snow in Toronto. It's been a while, buddy.
Yeah, over a month. We try to do these when we can, but Yeah, we've been watching stuff like we always do. There's a lot to talk about. I'm excited.
Okay. All right. So I figured maybe we should run through VIFF and TIFF first, and then before we get into some of the shows that we've been watching.
Yeah. So I'll go back over to my diary here. Well, actually, I sent you my diary a few days ago.
You did.
Was there anything in that you were like kind of caught your eye? You were like, oh, I like, because I think I saw 11 movies at TIFF this year.
I saw that. Dude, is that a record for you? It's not,
no,
right? Actually,
the record is the year that you came to TIFF, and I ended up seeing like we saw a bunch together, but then I saw a whole bunch with like other people, my brother, like and I saw 18 in 1 year. And that
is intense, man.
That was, I mean, I'm never doing that again. Cause like by the end of it, I had done a few like 3 movie days where my brain was cooked at the end of it. And I
don't have that much time to watch 3 movies in a day.
So yeah, don't recommend that. But I did see 11 this time, and that felt, I was kind of tired out by the end of it.
Okay. Well, you asked if there were any movies that sort of caught my eye. I was going to say that, like, I know TIFF and VIFF are very different. TIFF skews more towards, like, bigger names and more mainstream and more wide releases. And VIFF has really turned into, like, a real indie film festival over the past couple years, I'd say.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Yeah, there's been some interesting stuff coming to them. So they've kind of carved out their own niche.
Yeah, for sure. And it used to be that the opening movie and the closing movie were always like big names, big movies. Like we had Terrence Malick, but it didn't seem like they made an effort, or maybe we just couldn't get it, to have that big film out there, big name, big director at least. But I don't know. Did you feel that the roster for film festivals this year was a little weaker compared to past years? Like, there's always standouts, right?
There's standouts. I mean, there's always, the impact of the strikes. So, like, some stuff just wasn't getting made.
Still?
It's like roundabout, what was it? Like August, September, it was feeling like when you were going to, like, a regular theater, not during a festival, it felt a bit thin on stuff. And, a few people attributed that to, like, okay, we're still getting over the strikes. Like, stuff just wasn't getting made. So... that might have had an impact on the festivals this year, but I was surprised because one of the things I did see ended up winning the People's Choice Award. And when I saw it early in the festival, I would have never expected it to win People's Choice. And for people who are listening who aren't familiar with the way TIFF works, the audience gets polled at the end of every screening. You get to go to a link once you've seen a movie, and you can vote on the People's Choice Award. And being that TIFF is such a huge festival, it's one of the most attended ones in the world, usually you get a pretty good metric on like what people actually liked with the People's Choice Award. And oftentimes the winner of that award at TIFF goes on to get lots of Oscar nominations. It's been up for Best Picture. A lot of times people kind of take the winner of that as kind of a indication of where the awards race is going. So this year it went to a movie called The Life of Chuck, which is a adaptation of a Stephen King novella, directed by Mike Flanagan and starring Tom Hiddleston. And it is a very strange movie to win People's Choice. It had a kind of interesting structure, like moving in reverse, not quite like Benjamin Button, but
like Memento,
maybe, but like still different. Like starting with you're inside a guy's mind as he's dying. And you're meeting all of these people who are sort of representations of real people that this guy met throughout his life. And their world starts to break apart and turn off. And you're not entirely sure what's happening at this point. You're like, why is their world falling apart? Why are the stars in the sky like turning out or like turning off? Like, why is this guy's face plastered on every billboard? And this is the Chuck of the title, played by Tom Hiddleston. And then you come to discover like, oh, we're seeing the inside of his mind. And so as he's dying, this world that he's created for all these people that he's met is slowly winking out. And then we kind of go backwards through his life and we see him meet all of these people who would then be immortalized in this world in his mind. So like just saying it out loud, that you're like, oh, that's doesn't sound like a typical mainstream crowd pleaser type of movie, but yet it was the one that kind of connected with people at the festival. And I mean, I quite liked it. I thought it was, it's not my favorite of the festival, but it, really interesting performances, a different kind of spin from Mike Flanagan, who's been known on as a Netflix horror series guy for a long time, making things like The Haunting of Hill House and a few other Stephen King adaptations. So
do you find people's taste at film festivals has changed?
I mean, generally people's choice goes to something like Gravity, in 2014, or The Martian. It goes to the big things where you're like, oh, that makes sense. If you're going to poll a general audience to find out what they like the best, you're going to get stuff like that. So for something that has this very esoteric, almost spiritual kind of angle to it, it was a surprise. And I don't know if that was because there wasn't anything big, like a big sci-fi or genre thing to distract people this year. And you could chalk that up to the selection being weaker per se, but I thought it was an interesting pick. So another one I really liked was it was a Korean action comedy called I, the Executioner, which had this really over the top style to it. It was the sequel to something that had been the highest grossing Korean movie when it came out. Really weird kind of tragic comedy type of thing with a serial killer angle, but a Chow Yun-Fat style hardcore cop who kicks people's asses and has to deal with paperwork from his boss. And that was a lot of fun. And it worked really surprisingly well for somebody who wasn't familiar with the characters or the movie that came before. So if you ever see that come up, it's worth a watch. You don't have to do any homework.
I find Korean films are really good with action.
Yeah, choreography in this was really good, but they play it up for laughs almost in a Jackie Chan style. So they'll have a big wind up of a character going for a huge flying kick, and then they'll just miss and sail through the air past the target and land in a heap. And little things like that kind of subvert your expectations. But it concludes with a really almost Saw style death trap that the serial killer sets and forces the hero, the cop, to make an impossible moral choice. And so it kind of concludes in this really gritty way that you wouldn't expect from the more comedic opening.
Okay. There was one movie that kind of caught my eye, and it's partially because as two actors that I really appreciate, and that's The Luckiest Man in America, Walton Goggins and Paul Walter Hauser.
Yeah. That was a bit of a kind of a random pick on my part. I like those actors too, so I just wanted to see, what do they like together. It's a bit of a formulaic story. It's kind of it pitches itself as an underdog story. And you end up learning a little bit about this guy who I think it's set in the late 70s, early 80s, with a guy who turns up in the casting process for this TV game show. And he claims that he's the show's biggest fan. And the producers are initially kind of suspicious of him. He seems like, he's not all that trustworthy, but they're kind of won over by his enthusiasm and the fact that he's such a character. They decide to put him on the show, only to find that he keeps winning and winning and winning. And it's based on a true story. He this real guy had basically figured out how the question selection screen worked, and he had memorized all the patterns. So he wasn't cheating, but it looked like he was cheating at the time. And then the network executives are behind the scenes trying to figure out how is he pulling this off? Is he breaking the rules? Do we have to pay him this ever increasing pot of money? And so Paul Walter Hauser plays the guy in the middle of it, the guy who has cracked the code. David Strathairn is in there as one of the network executives who is being systematically embarrassed by this. As the show goes on, Walton Goggins is in full Righteous Gemstones, big teeth, slicked back hair as the game show host. So really fun performances. It feels a little kind of small scale, so that's why I didn't end up giving it like a gigantic score. It just feels a little simple, but it definitely a strong recommendation as like a streaming watch. Like if it came across your feed, it would be a good pick for that.
The one thing about all these movies is that, like, I hear you talking about them. It makes me want to watch them. But trying to find where to watch it after they're done the theatrical release is such a pain in the butt.
Oh, yeah, because, like, you never know who's going to buy the rights to it. And, yeah. Sometimes it takes, like, a year before the festival, like, between the festival ending and actually hitting streaming or any kind of distribution. Sometimes I'll think to myself, oh, wow, I saw that, like, nearly 2 years ago at the festival, and it's only just now getting released.
Yeah, like I remember, what was that Evan Rachel Wood movie? The Laundromat?
Oh, yeah, it was a Steven Soderbergh movie, I think.
Yeah, and I had to wait like a year or two to actually find it before I finally watched it.
It was weird.
Yeah, so the other one is Sketch. And this caught my eye because Darcy Carden was in The Good Place, which is one of my favorite TV shows.
Yep.
And Tony Hale, obviously, from Arrested Development.
Yes. Yeah, that was the big draw for me in this. I hadn't seen Tony Hale as the lead in anything before.
Well, he's not exactly leading man material, you know what I mean?
No. So I was curious to see what he'd do with it, being first billed alongside Darcy Carden. Although, I mean, to be fair, it's more of an ensemble piece again with the two child actors who play Tony Hale's children in the movie.
Okay.
And the plot revolves around a family where Tony Hale's the single dad. His wife has passed away recently, and his two kids are dealing with the grief. The whole family's processing the grief.
Right.
They're trying to sell their house, but the daughter finds this pond near their house that seemingly has some magical powers affiliated with it. And she discovers that if her drawings in her sketchbook end up getting immersed in the water, they come to life.
Oh, okay.
And so a lot of her drawings are like kind of intense because she's kind of using her sketch pad to kind of work through her feelings about her mom dying. So she's got a lot of like monsters and things drawn in it. And so all these monsters start marauding around the town, and they look like big animated children's sketches with like really goofy proportions and everything. And it's all brought to life with some pretty impressive CGI. It's a really small budget on this one. But they do a lot with what they have, and the kid actors are really solid. Like, you know, they never feel like kid actors. They really kind of, they get into the part. And it's one of those kids movies that comes along where you're like, all right, it's like a unique premise. It's dealing with like mature subject matter, but in an approachable way. It doesn't feel cloying.
Okay.
And it's probably one of the best like family films that I've seen in a long time. So
one I wanted to talk about, and it's Matt and Mara, directed by Kazak Radwanski, starting, I believe she's Canadian. I think she's definitely Canadian. Dara Campbell.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, and I wanted to talk about this one because Radwanski and Campbell actually work together quite a bit. I actually saw one of their films back at VIFF called Anne at 13,000 Feet.
Yeah, I remember.
And I remember being like, you know, it's got something. It definitely feels like sort of slice of life type of movie. Like you kind of follow someone around, and Dara Campbell's great, very naturalistic. I felt a little claustrophobic because like of how close you get to these people.
Yeah.
And it's just like some of the close-ups and some of the conversations. Feels like you're kind of eavesdropping sometimes. But I was wondering what you thought of Matt and Mara. It seemed like from the trailer is more of like very similar sort of style.
Yes, yeah, and like everything you just said applies directly to Matt and Mara. And I hadn't seen Anne at 13,000 Feet, so I remember you talking about it when you saw it, but then kind of like tucked it away, and then I recognized the title when they were doing the promo for this one, and it's one of those movies where like I can see the craft that they're putting on display. Like Matt Johnson is the friend who comes back into Dara Campbell's character's life, and they strike up, a familiar friendship again, and there may be like some hints of like romance mixed in, which is complicating because her character is already married and has a kid.
Feels like a budget Before Sunset type movie.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. But that only works if like you actually like the Ethan Hawke character here, which would be Matt Johnson. And Matt Johnson's character is not nearly as likable. He's kind of a mess. He has commitment issues. And yeah, you're just kind of following these two people around as they talk, and they're both like intelligent people who write for a living, and the camera just sort of follows them onto like, Toronto Transit, subway cars, and, walking down recognizable Toronto streets, or at least recognizable if you live in Toronto.
Do you find that sometimes distracting? Because I start trying to like pick out landmarks in the background.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
especially if I'm like starting to lose interest in the actual plot and characters, I start picking out like, hey, I think I've seen that place.
And that's kind of where I ended up, where like, I had to respect the performances, I knew that they were doing a lot of improv with the writing, but it just wasn't really connecting with me. It wasn't really my thing.
Right.
And I imagine there's definitely a niche audience out there who would just love this, like people who are actors or writers themselves, could definitely get into this, but it didn't really kind of connect with me. And I love Matt Johnson. He was great in the Blackberry movie. He has a very unique look and way about him, but yeah. So I don't entirely know if I would go to see another Kazak-Radzwanski movie in the future if it was going to be like this. But if he was doing something, if he was changing up his style a little bit, I would be down.
Some directors kind of have like their style and niche and find it like really hard to move away from. And I find most directors are like that.
If he's done this a couple of times now, I don't know if he like really wants to iterate.
Well, okay. What was the standout for you?
I'd say my favorite thing that I watched was this movie called The Assessment.
Is it because it has Alicia Vikander?
Maybe, yeah. And Elizabeth Olsen. I mean, come on. So Elizabeth Olsen's actually
maybe I would like this too.
She's the lead, alongside Himesh Patel. Do you know any of Himesh Patel's stuff? He's a British actor. He was in that Beatles themed one.
He was in Tenet.
He was in Tenet. Yeah, he has a secondary role in Tenet. He is always popping up in all sorts of things. But so this is a far future sci-fi with a kind of social message, where Elizabeth Olsen and Himesh Patel live in a future world where aging has been stopped. If you live in their society, you take a medication provided by the government, you don't age anymore. But a huge portion of the earth has been ravaged by the climate change. And they live in some sort of like domed kind of city where nobody ages, but then as a result, there's very limited resources because nobody's dying. So the government, the unseen government, gets to choose who has children and when. And the only way that they do this is by sending a so-called assessor to stay with a couple for a week in their home and subject them to a barrage of psychological tests, which borders on torture, and really kind of tease out, like, are they going to be suitable parents? So Alicia Vikander plays this nun-like assessor who comes into their home, and basically she's doing stuff like throwing tantrums as if she's a child, smashing things. She goes from being like childlike at 1 minute to severe and adult the next. Elizabeth Olsen and Himesh Patel's characters are just completely like destabilized. Alicia Vikander's behavior starts kind of causing the couple to fight, and you begin to question, like, how much is the assessor actually doing this because it's her job, and how much is she doing it because she's jealous of the couple and their ability to be chosen for this potential role in society. So very very strong performances. Another one of these movies that doesn't have a gigantic budget, but does a lot with what it has. Some really convincing CGI used very kind of judiciously.
Well, have you noticed that a lot of films, maybe it's just film festival, but I feel like a lot of films deal with like future climate change and infertility. Like it's kind of like been sort of a common theme in post-apocalyptic movies, most notably in Children of Men.
Yeah.
But the ones I'm talking about now aren't at that like action epic sort of scale, but definitely more like an everyday sort of drama.
I watched one at last year's TIFF actually that had kind of similar themes. Like it had to do with like a flood ravaging the UK. And so Jodie Comer plays a woman who is forced out of her home by this flood, and she has to kind of go and become a refugee within the UK, and she's carrying her baby around, and there's questions around motherhood and the ethics of raising children when the climate is falling apart and stuff like that. So it seems to be like an issue that's on filmmakers' minds to an extent, and maybe that's just like a symbol of where we're at as a society. But yeah, it's interesting to see what different people do with it.
Well, it's because there was a movie at VIFF that I ended up not going to. It didn't get great reviews. I believe it's a Sandra Oh led cast, and it basically dealt with similar things where like people were sort of erased from the world after they reach a certain age. And it dealt with very similar issues. Sometimes I get tired of these premises, it's like, it's so sort of not negative, but a little nihilism.
Yeah.
A little like, I'm just like, what happened to the old, sci-fi futuristic whodunit, like Minority Report?
Yeah.
Just like, give me a story that's set in the future and not about like people dying and having lack of empathy or sympathy.
Yeah. On that note, have you seen the trailer for the upcoming Bong Joon-ho film? It's called Mickey 17, and it's all about Robert Pattinson playing a series of clones who are being tossed into...
I've heard of this. I haven't seen the trailer, though.
Yeah. The trailer came out maybe a month ago, and I'll send it to you. It's a lot of fun. It looks if the movie is anything like the trailer, it looks like it's gonna be a blast.
Okay.
And I'm mad at the studio for dumping a Bong Joon-ho film in January because they don't know what to do with it.
But I think we talked about this before, but like there's no dead month anymore, right? Like January's still kind of dead.
Maybe not. No, that's fair.
But I find...
Yeah, historically January was the dumping ground, but I guess, yeah, that's starting to change a bit.
Because I don't think Oscar bait... Like it still comes out later in the year for sure, but I don't think all of it does. I think a lot of it has to do with like when you do your marketing push. Okay, do you want to talk about VIFF?
Yeah, so what do you got for VIFF?
VIFF, I saw I saw 5 films. Didn't have a lot of time to catch a lot of films. Didn't really want to do 2 a days, although I did one anyway. And like I said, there wasn't a huge list of films that I really wanted to catch. I caught the ones I really wanted to see. Usually every year there's like 10 or 20 films like I really, really want to watch. But I didn't get the same feeling this VIFF. So I saw A Different Man. That is the Sebastian Stan sort of dramedy about a disfigured man who gets plastic or surgery or gets his face fixed.
Yeah, I was reading about this one. I think it was like a review in the New Yorker, actually.
Okay, yeah. And it has... I always can't really say her name, but Renate Reinsve, that Norwegian actress from The Worst Person in the World, which is still one of the best film festival films I've seen.
Agreed.
I saw Fly Me to the Moon, which is a Asian film. Caught my attention because they speak all different dialects of Chinese, which is something you don't see a lot in film. It's about a family that deals with a dad who's a drug addict, and you go through sort of the 3 separate stages of his 2 daughters' lives and how he ends up impacting them.
Okay.
And then there was Conclave. You might know this one.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this at some point.
I think you would like this. So this is an Edward Berger film. Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, Isabella Rossellini. Very much sort of like a stage play. It's about the election of the next pope. Fictional, obviously. And there's sort of a murder mystery intrigue.
Yeah, it seems a little trashy, but I like.
It's not trashy at all.
Oh,
How is it trashy?
I don't know. It felt a little like, a little.
It feels a little Dan Brown.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah, like a little Dan Brown, a little sensationalized.
I don't think. Okay, so I don't think Dan Brown is trashy. I think he's a terrible writer, but I think he has like compelling anecdotes, and stories. Yeah. And this is part of it. Like, I think this movie's premise is very simple, but it's fully driven by its performances.
Yeah, and I like all those actors, so that's the big draw for me.
And it's kind of like, I don't know much about the Vatican. I know enough to know what happens, but it was just kind of like nice to see what it works from the inside, and how like the way they gather, the way they have lunch and meals, and all like sleep in their separate rooms. I think this was probably the best film I saw at VIFF, but it definitely elevates itself because it had such a big name attached to it, both the director and the actors. And then there was Julie Keeps Quiet. Okay, so that's a Danish film about a young girl at a tennis academy that is obviously going through a lot of like emotional stuff because one of the tennis players in her sort of academy had committed suicide, and it's implied that there was something inappropriate going on within the academy. Very much though, like a very atmospheric film. I find a lot of films are like this, especially with European films. Very understated. I didn't like it as much as I thought I would, and I didn't like it as much as the audience. It got a pretty good ovation, and when you guys walk out of TIFF, I can't remember, but do you guys vote, like have a ballot that you put into?
They used to, yeah. Like they back in the days of like paper tickets, which I mean wasn't that long ago, but still, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, if you had a paper ticket with you, you could put it in the ballot box and they'd count that. But now they've pretty much everyone's moved to digital tickets. So all you have to do is go to the voting site, put in your name, and then just vote for the film.
Okay, interesting. Well, we have digital tickets, but when you walk out of the theater, you still get a little piece of paper.
Oh, okay.
And you sort of like score it out of 5. And I remember seeing a lot of 4s. And I was like, really? Like, it would take me a lot for me to push it to a 4. I ended up giving a 3.
Yeah, you're at a 3 right now on Letterboxd.
Okay. It just felt like it was missing something. It felt like it could have been a much more compelling drama. Obviously, a lot of what happens is left unsaid, but I didn't get the same sort of character arc from Julie as I thought I would. And there was another film on there.
You got Paying for It.
Paying for It. Okay. So Paying for It is based on a comic. I believe he's Canadian. Written by a guy who basically ends his relationship with his girlfriend and starts sleeping with escorts.
Okay.
And that's what Paying for It means. And Paying for It, like the double entendre being like he pays for it in other ways in terms of like his social life, how people look at him, and the sort of relationships that he forms with these escorts. Really funny film. Really enjoyed it. It's made by a woman who used to work for the CBC, and I think she used to work at Much Music. So there's a lot of like Toronto references. There's like the veiled shot at Much Music. I think it's called, there's some sort of alternate name that they use. But I believe her name is Sukyin Lee.
Oh, yes, I've heard of Sukyin Lee, yeah.
Yeah. So she was actually at the screening I was in. Really, really funny woman, actually. I didn't really stay for the entire Q&A. But anyway, so Paying for It, based on the novel by a graphic novel by Chester Brown. Really funny. Quite graphic in terms of its nudity. I wasn't expecting that. Even though it's a film about like a guy paying for sex, I didn't expect it.
Okay, yeah.
But knowing Soo-Kyun Lee, she did this film a long time ago that caused a bit of commotion called Short Bus, and it would like dealt with like very similar like graphic nudity and sex.
Oh yeah.
And I just thought it was kind of like a heartwarming and funny film. The acting was good, very naturalistic. If you could track it down, I think that one, Conclave, maybe if you're interested, the Sebastian Stan film. That film was, I had mixed feelings. I enjoyed it for the most part, but I also didn't like the ending. It felt a little abrupt.
I heard it described as kind of like a Cyrano de Bergerac kind of frame where, he's approaching this romance, but he doesn't want to disclose who he really is. That kind of thing.
Yeah, there's definitely like a sort of like a double identity sort of thing going on, like a dual personality thing going on. At first, it's kind of funny. Afterwards, it becomes kind of tragic. And then it didn't feel like it came to the conclusion that I was looking for.
Okay.
It's not body horror. It's not like what's that Demi Moore film?
The Substance.
The Substance. Yeah, it's not quite like that. There is a bit of body horror in there, like when he's got this disfigured face and like pieces of it are falling off.
Oh yeah.
But it's just it's a very. There's a time skip in there at the end that I didn't necessarily. That sort of lost me, but overall, good film, kind of funny. I think you like it. It's A24.
It's interesting that you brought up paying for it because I just watched Anora, the new Sean Baker film.
I saw that. I'm so jealous.
Yeah, it won him the Palme d'Or at Cannes this year, and
is it as good as they say?
It is so good. I had a great
Really?
time. The only
Sean
one of
Baker.
his recent ones that I've missed was Red Rocket. I've seen Tangerine.
Oh, you still haven't seen Red Rocket?
Yeah, I've seen Tangerine. I've seen Florida Project, but I haven't seen Red Rocket yet. But like, even having not seen Red Rocket, Anora is still definitely like, it is very much a Sean Baker film. That same kind of closeness to like the world of sex work but like treating it in a very non-judgmental way. And this lead character played by Mikey Madison, what a like tour de force. Just, she's super fun to have on screen. And this world that she's dropped herself into with these like Russian oligarchs and everything, bumbling employees of this super wealthy Russian guy, and it just keeps going and going, and their night gets worse and worse, and but it's never like a gangster movie. You're never worried necessarily that like anyone's life is in danger, but there's this quest that's propelling them forward. And it's for me at least, it was a great blend of action and comedy.
Yeah, I'm so excited for that. How does it rank next to Florida Project?
It's definitely up there. I gave it 5. Oh yeah, super different. I gave it 5 out of 5. Anora. And I could give Florida Project a 5 too if I was in the right mood, but
you didn't.
I might be like a 4.5. It's hard to call. I think, Florida Project has like lots of very heartwarming qualities to it. So if that's what you're looking for in the moment, it obviously provides that and those kids. So this movie is much more adult, obviously, because it's very much in the world of sex work. There's no kids running around. There's no kind of like rainbows over the Magic Kingdom or anything. It's a lot grittier, but yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on to what we've seen recently, because I want to listen to you talk about Megalopolis and Joker, Folie à deux.
Oh yeah, you started sounding like some of the American news anchors trying to talk about that. Joker, Folie à deux.
Folie à deux.
Yeah, so well, this was a fun experiment because, as you know, I'm a bit of a student of bad movies. I like to occasionally go to see trash, like outright complete, like barely deserves to have been made trash.
You and me both sometimes.
sometimes you need to kind of ground yourself. You better appreciate the real highs of the things that you watch when you see the lows. And
it helps that you can get free tickets through that scene.
Well, yeah, if you're not paying for it or you're paying for it with loyalty points, it softens the blow a bit. So Megalopolis has been in development for, what is it, like 20 years longer? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Various numbers have flown around. Francis Ford Coppola's masterwork, as it's called, Well,
I want to learn.
And you think 1 year of medical school entitles you to plow through the riches of my Emersonian mind?
Entitles me?
Yes.
Entitles me?
Yes.
Entitles me?
Yes.
You have no idea about me. You think I am nothing? Just a socialite?
No, not nothing, but I reserve my time for people who can think about science and literature and architecture and art. You find me cruel, selfish and unfeeling? I am. I work without caring what happens to either of us. So go back to the club, bear it all, and stock the kind of people that you enjoy.
Fine. I will.
In a career full of masterpieces like Apocalypse Now and The Godfather and The Conversation, but also probably an equal share of total nosedive failures, like One from the Heart and some of his more recent stuff like Twixt, which I haven't seen. A lot of people have kind of written him off and sort of said like, oh, he's like in his 80s. There's no way he's going to get this made. And then he was like, bet. And he cashed in, not as in, some people reported it as like, oh, he sold his whole wine business. Not true. He sold like a portion of his wine business. He still wanted to hang on to a sizable piece of it. But he raised $120 million.
Which is insane.
That bought him full creative freedom, and he's always been a guy who's fought against studios. He hates studio notes. And sometimes he's been right. He's had made good choices over the years, but I don't know. Sometimes when it's a passion project and you got nobody around you to tell you no.
That's when danger starts, right?
Yeah. So that's how Megalopolis came to be. And, it's no secret now. I mean, it came out at Cannes back in May. All the reviews started hitting within days of that.
But I feel like maybe some people let him off because of him being who he is, but it felt like people went light on him on the criticism. I've read and heard of films getting ripped more, but it feels like Megalopolis is a worse film than the other ones.
The one thing Megalopolis has going for it is like you really feel like there are ideas there that like, while they're not well executed and it is boring for long stretches, really boring. There are so many strange choices that you can't help you can't help sit there and just be like, wow, I can't believe he did that. And it kind of layers on top of itself, one scene after another, and you're totally confused and you're not having a good time, but you're also having a great time. It's so like, it's a unique experience that I still sort of want to recommend to people, but with huge caveats, like, and it's long and the performances are often bad. Like Adam Driver has never been worse.
Really? I feel like he's been mailing it in at a certain point,
I mean, but not to say that like he can't recover from this, but this is really bad. And Dustin Hoffman's in it, John Voight. There's a lot of redeeming qualities in what Aubrey Plaza brings to the table. She plays this newscaster named Wow Platinum, who is always like,
I saw that,
skulking around and kind of like reporting on the things that happen. It's got this like swing for the fences premise involving like depicting New York as something called New Rome and kind of like mapping all of the stuff about the fall of the Roman Empire onto the like America that we recognize. And not all of it really connects. So yeah, you stumble out of the screening of it and you're just like, you don't really know which way is up. But at least you feel like you've seen something.
Okay.
And then you go to see Joker Folie à Deux.
For once in my life, I have someone who needs me.
How about you, Arthur? Do you still think you're a star?
Maybe, hopefully not the same day, because that would, mess you up. Your dreams would be dreams that night would be a mess. But Todd Phillips, we talked about the original Joker.
Yeah.
When was it? 2019?
Something like that. Yeah.
I mean, what a gulf between that, which I liked well enough but didn't love.
Yep. Same.
And this, which feels, I'm not the first person to point out, it feels like a middle finger to the audience. I mean,
did you hear what Quentin Tarantino said about this?
He said that he really liked Joaquin Phoenix's performance.
He said that Todd Phillips made a film that said "F you" to the entire industry.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Tarantino went deeper. He liked it because he thought Todd Phillips was making a statement about the current state of Hollywood. I don't know if that is what Todd Phillips intended.
Yeah, I mean, you could write a book on Todd Phillips's intentions for these two movies. I see what Tarantino.
Could you really? You find him that interesting?
No. I mean, like, you could write a book. It wouldn't be a good book, but you would write a book. and you just puzzling it out, because I don't think he knows himself some of the time. But I see what Tarantino is driving at there. Like, Tarantino's never been one to go with the flow. He hates this, digital cinema. He hates the franchise kind of way of working and all this like big capitalist movie making. So yeah, I mean, I can see him looking at what they did with Joker, which is like, yeah, doing a table flip on that whole model, the Marvel model, the DC model, like, superheroes suck. Let's just do something completely backwards. And does that make you feel better about watching this movie? I don't know. It sure didn't for me. I mean, for me, the Joker has got to be a guy who does crimes. Ultimately, he is a criminal, the clown prince of crime. You can have him with Batman or without Batman. I don't think you necessarily need Batman in the story, but you got to have him doing crimes. And Todd Phillips presents a 2 hour plus movie here where the Joker commits no crimes. He is either in Arkham or in a courtroom for the entire movie, except for a brief bit where somebody like sets off a bomb and he like runs out into the street for a bit, but then he hands himself over to the cops shortly afterwards. So he does no crimes. He is singing off key in a movie that's billed as a musical. And so every time he opens...
I read that out. I thought that was really funny.
Every time he opens his mouth, you're cringing because you've already heard a couple of bad musical numbers and like you're already like wanting to like stuff your ears because you're like, I don't want to hear anymore. Lady Gaga's not a whole lot better because she's, I think, tempering her singing a little bit to kind of not show off, to make Joaquin look bad. It's just a movie where they have an idea and then they don't execute on it. Like, you can have a musical about the Joker. That would be a fun idea where they're just bursting into song when they're supposed to be, doing something else. But then they only do it in like a half measure. They get partway there and then they don't commit. They kind of veer away, and the whole movie is like that. They want him to be like dressed up like the Joker and defending himself in court. And so he does that. He puts on the makeup. And that's the only time you see him do it. And the whole time he's doing it, he's doing like a Southern country lawyer accent. So he's like, I do declare that I am the Joker, but maybe I'm not the Joker. Were you there on the day? And blah, blah, blah. And you're like, what is going on?
Didn't Joaquin Phoenix pitch this movie?
I mean, yeah, I think he's taken a real...
I think he just wanted to show off his acting range.
I mean... that's all well and good, but he doesn't come off well. Yeah, and then, I mean, do you care about spoilers?
No, I will see it at some point. I'm just like, the first Joker kind of turned me off because of how awful people are in it. I enjoyed Joaquin Phoenix's performance. Having heard how bad this film is, I'm just not interested in seeing it.
Yeah. And now, like, you may very well go to see this, and having heard how bad everyone has said it is,
it might just be like, it's not that bad.
Yeah, I mean, and if that's the case, I mean, more power to you. But I mean, When I tell you now about what happens in the end, I'd be curious. So spoiler alert. So he goes through the whole arc of the movie, and he's trying to decide if he wants to be Joker. Is he Arthur Fleck or is he Joker? Finally, he decides he doesn't want to be Joker anymore. Joker's a bad influence. It's a voice in his head that he wants to get rid of. So he's just Arthur now. He declares this in court, and the clip is played in the news, and all the prisoners in Arkham see it. And so Arthur's goes back to prison, and it's basically implied that he's probably going to be in prison for the rest of his life. He's not going to get to go into an insane asylum or whatever, be declared insane. So he's walking through the prison, and a random prisoner comes up behind him, who we've only seen in a couple of shots prior to this, and shanks him. And then Arthur's bleeding out on the ground, and you're pretty convinced that he's gonna die, or he's dead. And then the other prisoner goes back, and in soft focus in the background, he's sitting against the wall, laughing, kind of like Heath Ledger laughs, and cutting his face with the shank. And the implication is this guy...
That's the...
Yeah. Okay. So like Joaquin Phoenix was never the Joker as we know him. The real Joker is this random guy that you don't even know his name. And so I'm not one...
Is that played by Barry Keoghan?
I mean, for all I know, because you barely see the guy, it could have been him.
That makes me even less inclined to watch the movie.
I know. And I'm like, I'm not one to get really hot under the collar about this stuff, because it's just a movie. It's like, you can't say that you're insulted by it or whatever. Of course. Yeah. But it does get under my skin a little bit that they go to all this trouble over the course of these movies to kind of tell you the Joker origin story. And then finally the reveal is like, oh, it's again, they're course correcting, they're kind of like, oh, we thought it was going to do, and it'll go this way. And it feels so pointless. What was all this discourse of,
oh, it feels like a waste of time. I hate it when they do that, right?
So yeah, when it comes out on streaming, maybe check it out, see what all the fuss is about. But I warned you.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Well, I didn't get a chance to see either of those two movies, but Megalopolis wasn't in theaters when I want to go see, and Joker just did not interest me at all. So I swung the other way. I went to see The Wild Robot.
I do not have the programming to be a mother.
They all need to eat, but yours needs to swim and fly.
He's a runt. His chances aren't super good.
I will protect him.
Find that inside you.
Remember how I just mentioned that sometimes you go to see a movie and you might know the city really well and you start picking out landmarks and stuff?
Is that the case here? You see bits of Vancouver?
No. Well, it's similar. I just find in animated movies now, if I start losing interest in the movie, I start wondering who is that voiced by? I know that voice, and I start thinking of all the actors that it could be, because it used to be that voice actors were voice actors. You didn't really know them, because you never saw them. But now they get all sorts of A-listers doing voice acting, which I find kind of weird, and I don't know. I have mixed feelings. But anyway, so The Wild Robot. So in the near future, I guess there's been a whole ton of climate change, because there's one scene where the Golden Gate Bridge is completely underwater and there's whales swimming over. But anyway, okay, so this wild robot called Roz lands on this uninhabited island, uninhabited by humans, only has animals. But this robot, Roz, is a human service robot. It's meant to do domestic tasks. And it crash lands on Earth, not Earth, on the island, and she's the robot's at the loss as to what to do, because she has no directive. So she ends up staying there, but she ends up learning how to communicate with animals, and she becomes sort of a surrogate mother to this gosling, this runt gosling that got left behind. And it's about this bond between Robot and Gosling, and it's like a very kidsy movie about like, overcoming your shortcomings because he's the runt of the family, and how robots can develop feelings and be sentient and be good and everything.
Right.
Overall, quite enjoyable. There's some cutesy moments. I had issues with how the plot progressed. There are a couple times where I thought the movie was going to end, but it didn't.
Okay, yeah.
It kind of dragged for a little bit. I thought there was like 2 or 3 endings in there that could have been the ending. But the animation, as in any animated movie these days, is excellent. I think there are some concepts in there that I really liked. It's kind of like a mix of The Iron Giant, which I loved, and sort of like John Smith and Pocahontas.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
Like how like he gets thrown into this like world he doesn't know, and he develops like an understanding and like a certain respect, and also like a certain sort of connection with all like nature and everything. And that's where
Right.
the wild robot comes from, because this robot has effectively become wild. But in some ways, the robot is a lot more relatable and a lot better than the other robots, because it's learned how to love and all that sappy stuff.
And then eventually the robots come to like pick the hero robot up, right? They like oppose.
Yeah, they tried to take him away. At first, the robot Roz tries to leave because she has no directive. So she has this like transmitter where she like transmits a signal, and the robot company comes and picks her up. She changes her mind, and this robot company actually finds out that she's missing and realizes that she's stored a lot of like really awesome info in her database about all the animals and everything, and they want basically her hard drive basically. So I guess there's a bit of Amazon in there, how they just like forcefully try and collect data without you knowing, and then try and take advantage of the data, sell you more stuff.
Or even a bit of Wall-E too, like the way Eve.
Yes, there's a bit of Wall-E in there for sure. I wouldn't say it's formulaic, but there's definitely like a lot of inspiration from other stuff, even though it is based on, I think, a children's book.
Yeah, well, that one was, I mean, it premiered back at the end of September, I think, and
not too long.
There was a
ago.
lot of people saying like, oh yeah, this is one of the better like kids animated ones to come out, and at least it has like, like it's a new adaptation and not like, some sequel.
My theater was like 3/4 packed, and it was like a weeknight showing, and I thought that was really interesting, and I think most of the people in the theater really enjoyed it. And it was funny, like the demographic, there's like basically no kids in my auditorium.
Okay, well,
it was
there
like
you go.
Young couples and like older people.
Yeah, I mean,
and me.
Animation's one of those things. It really does bridge a lot of different genres, and
there's a part of me that thinks that people are just so sick and tired of like the doom and gloom stuff, that they just want to see something straightforward and cute and simple and heartwarming. I thought we were gonna have like a real tearjerker of a movie at a certain point in this film, but it ends up like really like ending on a really positive high note.
Oh, that's nice. Well, I mean,
if it's on streaming, go check it out. I just want to quickly touch on TV shows.
Yes. All right.
Okay, so I just want to start. If you're looking for doom and gloom, The Penguin is a really great show. Legitimately, Colin Farrell and Kristen Milioti need to be like winning awards.
Yeah, I've heard that the most recent episode, or maybe the episode number 4, was like a total like barnstormer.
Yeah, like how she goes into her backstory and whatnot.
Okay.
And obviously they changed certain things in the Batman lore. I'm curious as to how it ties into the movie, although certain characters from the movie do appear in that show.
Okay. Yeah.
Like the corrupt police chief does appear.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And then they do a younger version of Salvatore Maroni.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting, but obviously Colin Farrell's like the connective tissue, and he is so good. He was talking about in this interview about how he never wants to revisit the Penguin character ever again, and I totally get it.
Yeah, like will they get him to like do a small like cameo or something in the second movie or what? But yeah,
he's supposed to be one of the villains in the second movie along with Clayface. So
all right, so then we've got
Rings of Power.
So yeah, we got to do Rings of Power. So how far did you get into it?
I got into about episode 4.
Okay.
And I'm finding it very hard to bring myself back.
Ooh, uh-oh. But now, okay, so let me ask you this, though. Do you know...
I do enjoy it more than the first season, though.
That was my question. Like, because, you know, I liked the first season better than a lot of people, but I do notice that it got way better in this one, in the second season. And I think...
Oh, so you agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it, you know, they started focusing on what was important, less of the hobbits, honestly. Like, you know, everyone...
Well, I kind of read ahead and like with the spoilers and stuff, so I kind of know what's going on, but some of the spoilers I read also just like made me not want to watch it.
Well, I mean, the biggest one is obviously like who the stranger is, which made me mad.
Which again is just as bad as the Saruman reveal.
Well, oh, you mean like the Kieran Hines character?
No,
like the Dark Wizard?
No, not Saruman. Sauron, sorry.
Oh, the Sauron one. Yes, okay.
Yeah, the Sauron reveal. Sauron. The Sauron reveal, yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, for people who've watched it, they know that a certain wizard shows up or is revealed to be a guy we've been following for a long time. And
certain wizards, isn't it?
Well, the Dark Wizard may still be one of the mysterious blue wizards. So they haven't named him yet. And I mean, I like a sucker. I hold out hope that they're not gonna just do fan servicey stuff.
Oh, they're gonna do fan servicey stuff.
And then they break my heart. So that is my recurring complaint about Rings of Power, is that at certain key junctures they seem concerned that they're going to alienate fans. So then they do the really obvious choice with the storytelling. And my argument to them would be, you've already invested $1 billion in making a show set in the world of Lord of the Rings. You don't have to convince people to watch this by bringing in fan favorite characters. If they're a fan of Tolkien, they're gonna watch, or they might hate watch, depending on how they feel. And the types of fans that you're courting are people who know this lore inside and out, and they, you know, you can trust them to bring in characters that they're not familiar with, like the Blue Wizards, and they seem a little scared to do that. And
I can't hate watch anything anymore. It's just a waste of time to me.
There is an excellent bit with the Balrog in the beginning of the final episode, and
okay,
it is like,
why is it excellent?
Well, it's just a really cool, like, action heavy scene, and like,
okay, you know, I see. Okay,
so they've made good on the hints about the Balrog from the last season, and yeah.
So I will say this about the Rings of Power: the production value is excellent.
Oh yeah.
Everything looks awesome. Like everything looks like it could have been a movie.
Oh yeah.
What I have a problem with is the plot. It's too thin, like stretched out too thin. It drags. A lot of the character motivations, and maybe you know better than me because I haven't read like the Silmarillion or don't know enough background about the books, but a lot of the character motivations don't make any sense. Characters do things that don't make no sense to me. Galadriel is clueless. As much as I like Morphic Clark as Galadriel, young Galadriel, the character itself, clueless.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of like a pendulum swing, I would say, because she was depicted as being like, you know, really headstrong and can do no wrong in the last season. And now they've kind of gone the other way where they're like, oh, she can be tricked. She can be, you know,
she's dumb,
etc. So they're still finding the balance on that. And yeah, it's
the guy who plays Sauron, still not convincing. Interesting. I think it's more like a personal thing because I've seen a lot of praise for him and his acting, but I can't see him as Sauron. Just can't.
He's too pretty.
Something about him doesn't feel menacing to me.
I will say that they do some good stuff between him and Charles Edwards, who plays Celebrimbor, and eventually
that part I agree. When he like transforms into like a fake elf,
yeah, Anatar, and they continue that is one of the main threads for the rest of the season, is their relationship and the way in which Sauron deceives him into making more rings. because initially Celebrimbor is very resistant to that. So they have to give you like something to chew on there.
Yeah. Again, Celebrimbor is an idiot.
Yeah. But
so are the dwarves. The dwarves are idiots too.
Celebrimbor is very prideful. He wants to be thought of as the greatest smith in the land. So Sauron's able to exploit that. Yeah, I know. You can see now, like, where they end up at the end of this season. It's pretty easy as a person, as a fan familiar with the lore and everything, where they're probably going to go with each successive season. I think they've paid for 5 seasons.
Jesus, there's going to be 5 seasons of this?
Yeah, because they spent $1 billion, so they're going to get 200 mil out of each one. But
where does it end?
Probably with, you remember the prologue of Fellowship of the Ring? So the showdown in Mordor, the ring gets chopped off of Sauron's hand. Isildur refuses to destroy it. That'll be probably the final episode of the whole show.
Okay, so maybe the final episode is Gollum or Smeagol finding it.
Maybe, yeah. Like there's a few ways they could do it, but so like next season will probably be the downfall of Numenor. So Sauron gets taken captive by the Numenorians.
Okay,
probably like relatively early in the season, and then he gets into Ar-Pharazôn's head and tells him that he has to rebel against the gods of the world, the Valar. And in so doing gets Numenor sunk beneath the waves, Atlantis style.
How old is Strider at this point?
He's not born yet.
He's not? I thought he was like 100 years old when we meet him in the Fellowship.
Yeah, he's almost 100, but those events don't take place for another 3,000 years.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Never mind. Forget I said anything.
Yeah. So then, yes, that'll be season 3. Season 4 will probably be the founding of Gondor. So they got to get, they got to get Isildur to be running around with his father, Elendil, and founding Gondor and Arnor and building all those cities, because those have got to get built.
There's a Lord of the Rings anime movie coming out, eh?
Yeah, that's coming out next month. No, December. Yeah, I'm excited for that.
I'm interested in that.
That's kind of zooming things forward like another 2,000 years or something. So it's before.
But it has to do with Gondor and Rohan, doesn't it?
Yeah, mostly Rohan. So about 200 years before the events of Fellowship of the Ring.
We're so nerdy.
God. So what did you think of House of the Dragon? Did you finish that?
I did.
Okay.
Did you finish it?
No, I haven't started.
Oh, you haven't started. Oh, okay. All right. Well, more things for you to catch up on. Okay, I'll make this quick. I like Hot D. I think season 1 was better. I think season 2, the conclusion fell a little flat, but they're setting the stage for what could be like a really explosive season 3.
And is that going to be the end for them, or?
I think season 4 is the end. Season 2 is a lot of stage setting. Granted, there are some big battles. There is one battle, I don't want to spoil too much, where the king gets involved and, all sorts of stuff happens. Really cool sequences, really cool showcase of all the dragons that you hear about in Game of Thrones. So it's nice that every dragon has distinct features, so you can really tell them apart.
Okay.
I think the 2 leads are great. Sometimes it falls in the trap of like, and granted, you could say this about a lot of epic fantasies and Game of Thrones too, is that like, if 2 people just sat out in the room and just talked over their issues, we wouldn't be having this big giant war.
Yeah.
It's just like a lot of misunderstandings, some ego is involved, but people can't be grown-ups and adults about this. I do recommend it. Don't get your hopes up for the season finale. It's not structurally quite the same as Game of Thrones, where like the second to last episode is like this huge giant battle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There's a bit, I think you like the part about Matt Smith because he gets cabin fever and there's a bit of like a Shakespearean sort of Macbeth thing going on.
Oh, all right. Yeah, he'd be good at that.
Yeah, he kind of goes off on his own and goes through a journey, like a mental journey.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd be curious to see what you think, because I know you're not as into Hot D as I am.
No, I mean I've definitely been more of a Tolkien fan than a George R.R. Martin fan for a long time. But
anything else?
No, I mean, we covered a lot of stuff. I'm proud of us. We have not figured out what next episode will be about, but you will know about it when we do.
What it was a great tease, Robert. Great tease.
But yeah, until then, my name is Robert Snow in Toronto.
And my name is Jason Chen in Vancouver. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
The Extra Buttery podcast is written, recorded, and produced by Jason Chen and Robert Snow. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to rate and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. And remember, popcorn is always better with extra butter.